Hey, welcome to the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today is Monday, February 26, 2024. Pretty good day in the market today. No complaints. Bitcoin is evidently on a bit of a tear. I think I saw it close to $55,000 a coin. That is pretty darn amazing, to say the least. Okay, let's do a little bit of math. So it's my understanding that Panther Creek utilizes about 8 megawatts of the approximately 80 megawatts that are produced by the plant. This is somewhat corroborated by some independent data that suggests anywhere from 5% to 10% of the electricity that's generated by a, say, Pennsylvania-based mine waste facility, such as Scrubgrass and Panther Creek, anywhere from 5% to about 10% of the electricity that's actually produced needs to get used internally to basically run the facility. So when we take the 165 megawatts that are produced by both Scrubgrass and Panther Creek combined, and we say, hey, let's say like 90% of that, we get, it's 148.5, let's just call it 149, 149 megawatts of electricity. Now, the thing is, these mine waste to energy facilities are not operational all the time. If we were to go back, I believe, to the Q3 2023, or I'm sorry, Q3 2022, I believe. Let's see, investor presentation. If I'm not mistaken, I think some guidance was provided by Stronghold Digital Mining at that time for the year ahead, which would have been 2023. Again, it's very difficult to make predictions or to extrapolate anything into the future. I mean, I think we've learned that lesson, but it's still sort of like useful, right? And this particular metric, I think, is something that we have a lot more control over, and that specifically, okay, 2023 guidance. Yeah, it says average power output, 135 to 140 megawatts. So what's going on, right? If, say, utilizing 10% of the electricity being produced, so remember, they make 165 megawatts of electricity combined. 10% of that gets used internally. What are you left with? About, say, 149 megawatts. Well, here they're projecting average power output of 135 to 140. Pardon me. So I believe what that essentially takes into consideration, and these are the operational assumptions that were made as part of 2023 guidance, I think what that kind of means is that it sort of takes into consideration the times perhaps when these plants are offline, be it for scheduled maintenance, be it for unscheduled events that arise. So, I mean, look, what I'll do is I'll just drop it from 149 to 140. So let's just assume, hey, 140 megawatts on average, right, over the course of, say, a year is what we can expect from both Panther Creek and Scrubgrass combined, right? Remember, a big portion of that goes towards operating the facility itself, but then another portion kind of gets, nibbled away just because of maintenance issues and, being offline and stuff like that. Again, pardon me, I will be taking some sips of water. I'm a little bit not well in terms of being able to talk here. So with all of that said, so let's continue on with the math. Okay, so we're going to do 140 megawatts. And, right, hey, you run 24 hours a day. So you multiply 140 by 24, and you get 3,360 megawatts of electricity that are being produced on, say, a daily basis. And that's 7 days a week. So we already know that a renewable energy certificate or, renewable energy credit gets created for each megawatt of electricity that's produced when that electricity is produced using a tier 2 alternative like sort of like source of energy, which mine waste qualifies for here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now you're saying, Stephen, but wait a minute, they produce 165 megawatts, right? With, with mine waste, wouldn't you be getting credits for all 165? And the answer is yes. But for the sake of keeping this somewhat simple, and if anything, we're being conservative as a result with these computations, we can safely, very safely, presume that we're basically generating about 3,360 RECs, or renewable energy credits, every single day. Now, when we go to the Intercontinental Exchange, otherwise known as ICE, and we just do a quick check for, say, Tier 2 RECs, Pennsylvania, what you essentially come up with is some pricing information. If you go to the tab that shows data, and then you look at, it's sort of like all these futures contracts. Let's just sort of pick April 2024. Let's see, do we get any data? Am I pulling up the wrong thing? Oh, you know what? Am I clicking on the wrong thing here? Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Sorry about that. I was choosing the intraday tab instead of more of like a 3-month. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Basically, we have, and you can look this up yourself. I mean, we basically have a situation where, generally speaking, and this is corroborated by what has been mentioned on various investor presentations. In fact, the Carbon Capture Initiative presentation on December 12th, 2023, I believe Greg sort of says, hey, let's just round it up to like $40. I'm going to be even more conservative. I see them trading at about, like, say, roughly 35. And again, this oscillates. They could go up to close to 40, maybe down a bit, say 34. Let's just say 35. So when you multiply 3,360 by $35, you get $117,600. So what that essentially means is that Stronghold Digital Mining is able to generate over $100,000 a day just on renewable energy credits alone. REC prices have risen dramatically, to say the least. And while there's no guarantee that they're going to remain elevated, a lot of data and some of the research that some of us, within the Stronghold or Strongholders community on X, we've sort of collectively, identified various data sources that seem to really suggest that, these REC prices are just kind of continuing to go up. So this is kind of a big deal, a really big deal from a revenue perspective. If we are, if we're selling electricity to the grid, and let's just take a look at grid prices right now. This is as of about 7:50 p.m. $29.95 in PJM Penelec, $23.53 in PJM PP&L. When we average those out, just in a very basic way here, again, this isn't intended to be a perfect average, just more or less here. I should be able to do this kind of math in my head, right? But I don't want to be too far off. So $26.50 is our average grid price. Those grid prices aren't really, that attractive per se, right? But say $26.50 on average. You add to that the $35 in renewable energy credits, and again, I'm kind of being, somewhat conservative. So what you end up with is $61.50 in total, megawatt hour revenue potential. So what does that mean, right? What does it mean? Well, if we multiply 6150 by the 140 megawatts, that's $8,610 per hour times 24 hours. That's $206,640. Multiply that by 90 days, and that's $18,500,000 597,600. I think that's an interesting number to think about. $18,597,600. Now, the reason I say that is, hey, what if Bitcoin mining economics after the halving aren't really that favorable, right? What if you find yourself having to toggle a bit more between grid sales and Bitcoin mining? Right now, Bitcoin priced in dollars per megawatt hour, right now it's $121, and change. So needless to say, right, right now we're probably devoting all of the resources we have towards Bitcoin mining, which makes sense. So what might our Bitcoin mining economics look like, right? We said, what did we just say? It was like 6150 if we had to just use REX and grid sales alone based on current grid prices, right? $35 multiplied by 2650, or I'm sorry, added to 2650. Yeah, say 6150. Okay, that's as of right now, REX plus grid sales. Now, what do you think our fleet efficiency is? This is, hopefully we're going to get some more information about this. My inclination is to believe that, I don't think at this juncture with these new machines that we just got delivered, I'd be hard-pressed to believe, and I did do some analysis as to all the different machines we've acquired over the past sort of year and a half. And a lot of these machines have been sub 30 joules per terahash. So I'm hard-pressed to believe that we are above 30, on a fleet-wide basis. Let's for the sake of the analysis, let's just call it 30. If you want, we could also just call it 25, because remember, the 1 exahash of additional Bitcoin mining machines that were purchased at the end of December 2023, which were slated for delivery in January 2024, to be installed January 2024, those were all cumulatively an average of 25 joules per terahash. If you want to split the difference, we could do that. Why don't we do that? Why don't we just call it then 27? All right, so 27 joules per terahash. A joule is sort of like a watt, not exactly, but it kind of works out that way. So if we know that we basically have 130 megawatts of data center capacity, so that's 130 million watts, right? So when we divide that by 27, that, it's kind of weird because that would imply that we have 4.8 exahash of Bitcoin mining capacity, which I'd be very surprised if that's what we have. Again, does it make sense to continue the analysis when we're not really sure if we swapped out older machines to bring in newer machines? What's really going on? Again, this is just so we have a number to work with. Please don't treat this as gospel truth. Okay, we're just kind of working with some, sort of back of the envelope numbers, so to speak. Okay, so let's say that that would mean, hey, fleet wise, you'd have roughly 4.8 exahash. What would Bitcoin mining economics themselves look like under a situation where we have the halving? What does BTCMW look like? Well, to keep it simple, you could kind of just cut it in half, really. So right now it's at 121.48. Let's divide that by 2. You get $60.74. I should have probably just done that from the beginning. I apologize. Again, I'm just doing this sort of we're working on this together. And I'm not feeling 100%, but I wanted to kind of do this analysis. So yeah, so if you just take BTCMW divided by 2, as of the numbers right now, you get $60.74. So after the halving, okay, absent nothing changing, let's assume everything were just exactly the way that it is right now, you'd essentially, and again, these are very rough numbers here, okay, don't treat this as gospel truth, because bear in mind, I also have to make adjustments to the dashboard. This dashboard, I think, still assumes that our network hash rate is 32.5. I'll have to double check that. I'm going to see if I'll reach out maybe to one of the coverage analysts who I've interacted with a little bit, and sort of like maybe say, hey, maybe you want to ask, hey, during the one of the calls, hey, can you just kind of state what your fleet average is as of like right now? That could be really useful to know, right? So again, treat this with a little bit of a grain of salt. But the point I'm making is, right now, if all we did was sell electricity to the grid, we'd pretty much be more or less at $61.50 per megawatt hour. If the halving were to happen right this second, suddenly we're just, hey, mining Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, the halving took place. Hey, what does Bitcoin mining economics look like? You're looking at $60.74. It's not really that different from, the opportunity that exists with grid sales. And we already know that grid prices definitely can go up a lot more than, what do we say the average was? Like $26.50 when you average out PJM Penelec and PJM Panther Creek, or PJM Penelec and PJM PPNL. So, I think the reason why I'm sharing this, and there's probably like nobody left watching this. I know this is very kind of boring and dense, but I think this is interesting because there's this presumption, right, that, hey, if a company doesn't have, if Bitcoin mining economics don't work for a Bitcoin mining company, they've got no other option, right? Like, what are you going to do? Stronghold Digital Mining is different. There are so many other options that exist. Bear in mind, too, hey, and this is something else I'd love for a coverage analyst to ask. Hey, specifically, what is the penalty if we import more power than we send out to the grid? Like, what's the math behind that? Is it a 5% penalty? Is it a flat amount? Do they tack a certain amount of money to each megawatt that's imported? I mean, I understand that, as Greg has mentioned, Greg, of course, being the Chief Executive Officer of Stronghold Digital Mining, he's mentioned in past investor presentations, we have to make sure that we net out, that ideally we're sending as much electricity into the grid as we might be pulling from it. But I mean, hey, what happens if we pull more electricity from the grid than what we send to the grid? Like, what really is the penalty? I mean, is it a draconian penalty? 300%, of an increase in price somehow? Or is it something that, depending on Bitcoin mining economics, it might make sense to just pull that electricity in from the grid so that we can use it to energize the data centers, especially if grid prices are particularly low. I mean, if you're looking at grid prices at like $18, $19, $20, that's a very low cost of power. I mean, an incredibly low cost of power. So why not just take advantage of that? Now, listen, I'm sensitive to the fact, but yes, we want to clean up mine waste. I get that. We can't clean up mine waste if we're out of business. So we got to do what we got to do in the interim to stay in business, right? So that on a longer term basis, we can keep cleaning up mine waste. We can keep utilizing that beneficial use hash to absorb carbon, CO2 from the atmosphere, right? So that our carbon capture project can start yielding positive results. This company, I'm convinced, and it's depressing at some level, and I don't mean depressing in a clinical sense where it's like, I'm in bed for 2 weeks. I mean, it's like frustrating and slightly depressing, to see like how it feels like we're deeply, deeply misunderstood. I get that this company is not perfect. Stronghold Digital Mining is not a perfect company. It's becoming more obvious by the day that there's no real perfect publicly traded Bitcoin mining company. But I am hard pressed to really understand why this optionality that exists isn't better recognized by the market. Okay, listen, this was like a long-winded bit of a diatribe. I'm doing the math as I'm having this conversation because, again, I'm really starting to think about, questions that I think would be useful to have answered in our next investor presentation. One being, hey, what's exactly our plugged-in deployed hash rate? Two, what's our fleet-wide efficiency? And again, I understand that there's like hosting partners that have some of their machines. Maybe it could be broken up into two ways of looking at it. Hey, what's our own like self-owned efficiency rate? And then, hey, what's the hosted efficiency rate? Which I've been actually, that's relatively easy to figure out because we kind of know that information. But again, because of all these changes and more machines being brought in, we don't really know what's being sold. Maybe the 10K will have more data, but again, I think this would be a really good question to ask. And then really critical, because sometimes grid prices are so low. Hey, what's the penalty for bringing in more electricity than what we send to the grid? Like, what kind of penalty are we really looking at? And hey, would it make sense to set up some sort of like subsidiary that's like a utility company that essentially maybe buys that electricity from the grid, quote unquote, sells it to us? Like, do we avoid the penalty that way? Are there ways to avoid the penalty, right? Somehow. These are all things that I think would be very interesting to explore. Okay, my friend, I promise not to do this very often. I really don't. Usually I try to keep these things nice and short. But my point is, look, I'm not inherently concerned about the halving. We have options. And so it's one of those things where, look, if Bitcoin mining economics are awesome, that's great. I mean, Bitcoin at nearly $55,000 a coin, that's awesome. Hopefully it gets a bit higher than that. But at the same time, this business truly does have optionality that is real optionality. It's not like gimmicks. It's not like accounting gimmicks or, sleight of hand. I mean, this is, like, it's real. You know what I mean? Like, this is as real and as tangible as it gets, right? You have mine waste facilities that generate electricity. I've been to Panther Creek. I've seen it. It's not a Hollywood prop, right? I mean, this is like a real thing. You could do one of two things with the electricity. You could sell it to the grid, use it to mine Bitcoin, maybe do a little bit of both. You have this beneficial use hash that's a byproduct, right, of the mine waste to energy process. Now we've got this carbon capture initiative. It's showing some very promising results. I'm excited to see what we're going to learn about that. And we just got to stay positive, got to try to be great, and we'll see each other again tomorrow.